Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, where today we're going to be following Bullitburst here in the German Tier 8 super heavy tank. This thing weighs 120 tons, the VK101P. The VK100 what? I haven't heard of this tank, Jingles. Certainly haven't seen it in any war movies. Well, yeah, it's a fair cop. When a game's been around as long as World of Tanks has, they have to start making stuff up. In fact, I think they started running out of real tanks shortly after they introduced the Swedish line, and they had to make up some of those. There are, in fact, I think most of the tanks in this battle did actually exist, but the VK101P is not one of them. Essentially, this is a mouse prototype, but it only existed in blueprints. Nobody ever built one of these. Now, I realise that can be quite a turn-off for a lot of people. They want to play tanks that actually existed. And there are plenty of tanks in World of Tanks that actually existed. They just become few and far between the higher up the tiers you go. Of course, then you have to open the whole can of worms over what exactly do you mean by a tank that existed? I mean, did the mouse exist? Some people would say yes. They built one, didn't they? Well, did they? They built a couple of hulls and a mock-up turret. But that doesn't make it a tank, that makes it a couple of hulls in a mock-up turret. Technically, that's not even a prototype. So, did the mouse exist? Well, something called the mouse existed, but it wasn't what you would call a tank. It was barely even a tank prototype. So where do you draw the line? Well, it's difficult to say, really. Because if you built an actual prototype of a tank, then you have built a tank. It doesn't necessarily have to have gone into production and seen service. But even if you say, well, okay, the tank doesn't have to have gone into production, it doesn't have to have seen service, it just has to have at least been built, then there's only one tier 10 German tank in the entire game that actually existed, and that's the Leopard 1. You could say the mouse existed. I would disagree. I'd say half of the mouse existed, and that's not the same thing. Does this bother you? Well, for a lot of people, obviously it doesn't, because tier 10, which is overwhelmingly packed full of tank designers' fever dreams rather than anything that actually existed, is what most people in World of Tanks aspire to. Most people want to get to tier 10. And that's fine, as long as you don't mind playing works of fiction, which is what most of the tier 10 tanks in the game are. For those of you for whom this is an issue, you're probably better off sticking at tiers 5, 6, 7 and 8, which is absolutely chock full, not just of tanks that did actually exist, but some truly iconic examples of tanks. The Sherman, the T-34, the Tiger II. The E75 TS, yeah, not so much. The SU-100Y, even though it's only tier 6. Well, they did build one, there was a prototype. The VK101P, yeah, not so much. Then again, if that sort of thing doesn't bother you, there is a lot to like about this tank, and it's a tech tree tank, by the way. It's not a premium, you don't have to spend any money to play this thing. It is very strong in certain regards, but it definitely also has weaknesses. Let's talk about the strengths, some of which Bullitburst is already demonstrating. The frontal armour is very, very strong. He's already blocked nearly 1,000 damage, including some gold ammo from the E75 TS down there. And the 128mm gun, as this IS is about to find out the hard way, really packs a nasty punch. The frontal armour on this thing is so strong that it can even give tier 10 tanks trouble, which is useful because it will have to fight tier 10s, whether it likes it or not. You may have noticed that things are not going too well here. The team have already lost 7 tanks and only managed to kill 4, one of whom Bullitburst took care of, but he's about to rack up his second kill. He needs to clear his flank, and he's just done it by taking out the IS. Now he should be in a position to assist the Centurion around the right hand corner with the E75 TS and the T29. He's got a beautiful side shot on the T29 and is robbed of damage there. I have no idea what happened. Now the T29 is going to fire back, he angles, and this is something that you're going to need to get used to if you're driving German heavy tanks, because they are all very boxy and square. And they do have good armour, but that armour is meaningless unless you angle it and cover up the weak spots, which in the VK101P means covering up that lower glacis or angling it very well, which is exactly what Bullitburst is doing. And if you're engaging a target at close to medium range, you've got to keep the turret moving Ooh, can he finish him off with a ram? It's gonna be... Yeah, he's heavy enough. He does weigh 120 tons. But you have to keep the turret moving because you see the commander's hatch on the top? Yep, that's a weak spot. Another bad thing about this tank is that the armour is only really good at the front. I mean, the side and rear armour is tough, but it's not tough enough unless you can keep it angled. And that, of course, means knowing where you're getting shot from, or where you're likely to be getting shot from. You've got to think about where you're going before you do it in this tank. And you'll have plenty of time... Oh, hang on. There's another kill. Nice. But you'll have plenty of time to think about where you're going and how you're going to get there, because the top speed of this thing is only 20 kilometers per hour. Although it does have a very, very powerful 1200 horsepower engine, so you shouldn't have too many problems maintaining that pitifully slow top speed. And that god-awful top speed means that he cannot afford to be distracted by things like the VK3002M over there. He's being capped, he's got about 30 seconds left to do something about it. He's just going to have to take the hit. And it's the T54 Mod 1. Now, while this gun does pack a punch, its penetration isn't great. I mean, it's not bad. It has 220mm of penetration on this 128mm gun, which is perfectly fine for Tier 8. But the downside is the painfully slow reload, which means, in common with most other German heavy tanks, the DPM of the VK101P is diabolically bad. It was good enough, however, to clutch the reset, even though he didn't do any damage to the T54 Mod 1 and had to kill him with the third shot when the first one should have done it, because just blowing his tracks off counts. Module damage is enough to reset a capture timer. I do find it more than a little ironic, however, that so far the only tank that has actually done any damage to him was the VK3002M with its poxy little 75mm gun, and he wasn't firing gold. It's almost as if knowing where to shoot and outflanking trumps sitting in front of heavily armoured tanks and puking gold at their turrets. Who'd have thought? Now, Bullitburst did just ask that T29, who has 105 health, to come together with him, which makes a lot of sense when you only have 105 health. Because, well, health is one thing that Bullitburst is not short of. So he could take the hit quite easily from the M44 there, who has had all the time in the world to line up and wait for the T29 to come around the corner. The T29, however, consumed by bloodlust, didn't want to wait for anybody. Now, Bullitburst isn't going to have any problems whatsoever killing the M44. With the high explosive nerf, there's very little chance that the M44 is going to do any kind of damage to a VK101P. Oh, he's spotted. Actually, that was... Here's the thing. Now Bullitburst has to chase down and kill a French light tank, the AMX-12T. He did just get spotted there. But dead tanks can continue to spot for a couple of seconds. So was that the M44 spotting him, or was the AMX-12T looking at him? It was probably the M44, but he'd be wise to not just make that assumption and plan for the possibility that it was the AMX-12T. But here's the problem. What exactly can he do about it? I mean, he's in a tank that can only do 20 kilometers per hour and is so big and has such bad stealth that it could be seen from the International Space Station. And he's trying to chase down and kill a tank that has exceptionally good stealth and can do 60 kilometers per hour. This is a bit like being in a battleship in World of Warships, the last ship left alive on your team, and having to deal with a destroyer who can basically pick and choose when, or even if, he wants to fight you. It's a nightmare of a situation to be in a big, slow, heavy tank like the VK101P, because the AMX-12T can run rings around him. And he's not AFK, or at least he wasn't, because he was spotted around here quite some time ago. And this is Bullitburst's cap circle, so he's clearly driven across half of the map. And right now, he could be absolutely anywhere. The one thing Bullitburst knows is that right now, he is not spotted. And you can use that to your advantage. Because the usual tactic for a heavy, or sometimes even a medium, or a tank destroyer in this kind of situation, where you're facing an enemy tank that is vastly more sneaky and vastly faster than you are, is to sit in his cap circle and force him to come to you. But if that AMX-12T is sitting lurking in a bush somewhere, waiting for Bullitburst to do exactly that, and then rush into Bullitburst's cap circle before he reaches the AMX-12T's cap circle, the AMX-12T is going to win, because there is no way Bullitburst would get back to defend the cap in time, not with a top speed of 20 kilometers per hour. However, he knows that his stealth is terrible, and this is exactly why, and anybody who speaks Dutch, please confirm this for me, because they were discussing the situation in the battle chat just there. This is why he's not being subtle about driving to the enemy cap circle, because he's never going to see the AMX-12T, unless the AMX-12T makes a serious error of judgment or wants to be seen. But the AMX-12T will have no problem seeing him, and he can use that to his advantage. If the Sixth Sense icon goes off, he knows the AMX-12T is within line of sight somewhere. So by sticking to the open and not trying to be as stealthy as it's possible to be in a tank the size of this, he's using the Sixth Sense ability to tell him where the AMX-12T is. And thus far, he doesn't know where the AMX-12T is, but he knows where he isn't. He isn't anywhere that had a line of sight to Bullitburst's tank on the long and lonely drive from his cap circle to here. And he knows that because Sixth Sense didn't activate. The AMX did not see him. The other reason, of course, why he made sure he kept to open ground for as long as he possibly could on the drive over here, is because his biggest nightmare is that AMX-12T popping out of cover somewhere, getting behind him and chipping away at his health, with him not being able to do a damn thing about it, because this tank is just too slow, too cumbersome. But he's made it, and he's in a position where he can be reasonably sure that the AMX-12T is not going to pop up behind him, where the AMX-12T cannot penetrate him from the front, and where there's enough open ground that he will see him coming and be able to put a shot into him, hopefully killing him before the 12T can get into his weak spots out the rear. What's interesting is that despite the fact that the AMX-12T was not AFK, has moved around the map, and has 2 kills to his name, he's doing absolutely nothing about the fact that he's about to lose this battle. He's not trying to counter-cap, he had all the time in the world to do it, and if he was anticipating Bullitburst doing exactly this, he had all the time in the world to set up an ambush. Because the worst thing that could happen right now, and I've seen it happen before, would be for the 12T to wait until round about now, and then put a shot into Bullitburst's tracks, reset the cap counter, and force a draw. But Bullitburst knew that wasn't going to happen, because he knew the AMX-12T wasn't looking at him, because the Sixth Sense skill didn't go off. So I have no idea what the AMX-12T's plan was, but if his plan was to do absolutely nothing for the last 3 minutes of that battle, and hand Bullitburst the victory he deserved, well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. Ace Tanker, Invader, High Caliber, Defender, and Top Gun for Bullitburst in the VK 101P. It's pretty impressive getting Invader and Defender in the same battle in a tank that can only do 20 kilometers per hour. I mean, that's not something you expect to see every day. Honestly though, the AMX-12T, I suspect what probably happened was that he simply flipped the tank over and spent the last 3 minutes of that battle flailing around helplessly and unable to right himself. Of course, we'll never know, because Wargaming decided that World of Tanks players were too toxic to be trusted to speak to each other on opposite teams, but I suspect that's probably what happened. Either way, an unusual game, and a well-deserved victory for Bullitburst in the German Tier 8 heavy tank, the VK 101P. Hope you all enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.